Hi guys, today I'll be taking a look at a tactile switch from Kailh, the Kailh Box Brown. Let's get started. Now, the Box Brown is part of the Box lineup which originally consisted of 4 switches, 2 linears, 1 tactile and 1 clicky. Today I'll be focusing on this, the Brown tactile switch. But before I move on, I want to say that I've already reviewed the previous 3 switches in the lineup, so if you want to know more about this switch design, watch my Kailh Box White video and skip to the overview section. Now in terms of pricing, these go for around £6 for 10 switches on AliExpress, making these mid-tier switches as far as price is concerned. And this is what they look like when disassembled. Feel free to pause the video. Now let's move on to the switch categories. On-center key presses are decently smooth with only minor scratchiness when keys are slowly pressed. However, off-center key presses are significantly scratchier with many switches exhibiting decent levels of scratchiness across the board. Overall, these are not what I would consider to be smooth switches and I personally wouldn't recommend these, although they are slightly better than average, 6 out of 10. Now, according to the manufacturer, these switches have an actuation force of 45 grams at 1.8mm, a 60 gram tactile force, and a total travel of 3.6mm. Now, in terms of the actual key feel, these are very light and not really to my preference, plus they have a Cherry MX Brown-like tactile bump, which essentially means these aren't exactly tactile, which is a shame. However, on the bright side, the weighting consistency is at least, well, consistent, which is a nice bonus at this point. Overall, I'm not the biggest fan of these, but if you like your switches to be very light and barely tactile, these may be for you, but definitely not for me. 5 out of 10. Now, these clearly weren't built with acoustics in mind, but they sound okay. They're a bit thin and hollow, but very clacky. Overall, I'd say they're just above average, but nothing special. 6 out of 10. Now, take a listen and enjoy. Now, typing on these was a lackluster experience, but if you're actually interested in buying one of these, the typing experience is pretty much in line with the Cherry MX Brown, very light and not very tactile. Basically, it's a pointless switch, at least for me anyway. However, on the upside, they're quite consistent with regards to weighting, which meant I didn't make as many typing errors as I otherwise would have, so it's not all that bad, just mostly bad. Overall, I think it's quite obvious that I'm not a fan. These are very unimpressive and not up to par even with switches in its price range. 5 out of 10. Now, gaming on the other hand was quite good. Yes, surprisingly, and if you're wondering why, it's because these are essentially linear switches in most gaming scenarios, and coupled with their light weighting and decent enough consistency, it's able to compete with comparable linear switches. Now, with that said, it's up to you whether you think that's a positive or a negative trait with these switches. Personally, I think it's a negative one since these are advertised as tactile switches, but perform more or less like a linear one, so in my books, these are a failure because you can't rely on its tactility. Overall, when it comes to gaming performance, which remember is what I'm judging these on, is pretty decent. However, everything else, not so much. 7 out of 10. In conclusion, I'm a little disappointed with them. I didn't think these would be a great switch or anything, but I did expect a bit more out of them. Suffice it to say, I'm not a big fan of these. The final score for this switch is 29 out of 50 or 58%. Not great, but not terrible either. And that's the end of the review, and next time I'll be taking a look at a requested linear switch. Until then, take care and goodbye.